I never thought that a mundane chore like cleaning the pool would lead to one of the most unexpected and forbidden experiences of my life. At 36, I was living a comfortable life in Miami, balancing my days between managing a small but thriving boutique and trying to maintain some semblance of a social life. My husband, Daniel, was often away on business trips, leaving me to take care of our sprawling suburban home. It was during one of these trips that everything changed. The day had started like any other sunny day in Miami. The heat was relentless, and I decided to spend the afternoon by the pool, trying to relax and catch up on some reading. I had been feeling increasingly lonely lately, with Daniel's frequent absences and our once passionate marriage now feeling more like a distant memory. I tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the warm sun and the gentle breeze. I was lost in my book when I heard the gate to the backyard creak open. I looked up to see Mark, our pool cleaner, making his way toward the pool. Mark was in his late 20s, with a muscular build, sun-kissed skin, and a boyish charm that made him popular with all the neighbors. He had been cleaning our pool for about a year, always friendly and professional, and I never gave him much thought beyond that. "Afternoon, Mrs. Reynolds," he greeted me with a friendly smile, his deep blue eyes sparkling in the sunlight. "Hey, Mark," I replied, smiling back. "Just call me Sarah. You make me feel old when you say Mrs. Reynolds." He chuckled, setting down his equipment. "All right, Sarah. How've you been?" "Oh, you know," I said with a shrug. Same old, same old. "How about you?" "Can't complain," he said as he started setting up to clean the pool. "It's been a busy summer, lots of pools to take care of. But I can't complain about working outside all day." I watched as he got to work, moving around the pool with practiced ease. I tried to go back to my book, but I found myself distracted by his presence. There was something about the way he moved, the effortless way he handled the pool equipment, that caught my attention. I shook my head, trying to focus on my book, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Mark. After a while, Mark paused his work and looked over at me, a playful grin on his face. "You've got a great spot here, Sarah. Must be nice to have a pool like this." "Yeah, it's great," I said, closing my book and setting it aside. "Especially on days like this." Mark nodded, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "It's a hot one, that's for sure." We made small talk for a bit, chatting about the weather and his other clients. I found myself enjoying the conversation more than I expected, appreciating the easy rapport between us. As we talked, I noticed Mark glancing at me every now and then, his gaze lingering just a little too long. I couldn't help but feel a small thrill at the attention, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. "Would you like something to drink?" I offered, standing up and stretching. "I've got some lemonade in the fridge." "That sounds great. Thanks," he said, flashing me another one of his charming smiles. I went inside and poured 2 glasses of lemonade, taking a moment to study my thoughts. I was being silly, I told myself. Mark was just being friendly, and there was nothing more to it. But as I carried the drinks back outside, I couldn't ignore the flutter of excitement in my stomach. When I handed Mark the lemonade, our fingers brushed, and I felt a spark, a jolt of electricity that took me by surprise. He looked at me, his expression briefly shifting to something more serious, more intense. But then he smiled and took a sip of the lemonade, as if nothing had happened. "Thanks, Sarah," he said, his voice casual. "This is perfect." "You're welcome," I replied, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing. I sat back down, taking a sip of my own drink, and watched as Mark continued working. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, a subtle change that I couldn't quite put my finger on. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself glancing at Mark more and more, my thoughts drifting to places they shouldn't. I tried to remind myself that I was married, that this was just harmless flirtation, but the temptation was growing stronger with every passing minute. Then, as Mark was finishing up, he turned to me with a mischievous grin. "You know, I've been doing this for a while now, but I've never actually had the chance to enjoy one of the pools I clean." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh, really? Well, you're welcome to take a dip if you'd like." He hesitated for a moment, then shrugged, setting down his equipment. "Why not? It's too hot not to." He quickly stripped down to his swim trunks, and I couldn't help but admire the way he looked, fit, confident, and completely at ease. He dove into the pool, surfacing with a playful splash that sent water cascading over the edge. "Come on in," he called, his voice teasing. "The water's perfect." I laughed, shaking my head. "I don't think so. I'm good right here." "Suit yourself," he said, floating lazily on his back. "But you're missing out." I watched him for a moment, feeling the pull of the water and the allure of the moment. It had been so long since I'd done something spontaneous, something just for myself. I hesitated, then made a split-second decision. "What the hell?" I muttered, standing up and peeling off my cover-up. I was already in my swimsuit, and before I could second-guess myself, I jumped into the pool, the cool water enveloping me in an instant. When I surfaced, Mark was grinning at me, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "There you go. I knew you'd give in." I splashed him playfully, laughing as he splashed back. For a few minutes, we were like kids, splashing and playing in the water without a care in the world. It felt good, better than I had expected, and I let myself get lost in the moment. But as the playfulness began to fade, the tension between us returned. We floated closer to each other, the laughter dying down as our gazes locked. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the space between us shrinking with every passing second. "Sarah," Mark said softly, his voice filled with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "I've always thought you were beautiful, you know that?" I swallowed hard, my breath catching in my throat. "Mark, He reached out, his hand brushing against my arm, and I felt a shiver run through me. "You don't have to say anything," he whispered, his voice low and filled with desire. I've wanted to say it for a long time. I knew I should pull away, should end this before it went any further. But the truth was, I didn't want to. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me the way Mark was looking at me now, like I was the only person in the world. Before I could stop myself, I closed the distance between us, my lips meeting his in a soft, tentative kiss. It was brief, just a fleeting touch, but it was enough to send a jolt of electricity through me. When we pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavily, our foreheads resting against each other. "This is crazy," I whispered, my voice trembling. "We can't do this." "I know," Mark replied, his eyes searching mine. "But I don't want to stop." Neither did I. But the reality of what we were doing began to sink in, and I knew that I couldn't cross that line, not completely. "We have to," I said, pulling back. "I'm married, Mark. I can't do this to Daniel." Mark nodded, his expression filled with regret. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean to. It's okay," I interrupted, my heart aching. I'm confused. I don't know what I'm doing." We swam to opposite ends of the pool, the moment broken but the tension still lingering in the air. I climbed out of the pool, wrapping myself in a towel and trying to steady my racing heart. Mark followed suit, grabbing his things and heading for the gate. "I should go," he said, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry if I made things awkward." "It's not your fault," I replied, though my voice was barely above a whisper. I need to figure things out." Mark nodded, giving me a small, sad smile. "Take care, Sarah." As he left, I felt a wave of emotions crashing over me. Guilt, confusion, and an aching sense of longing. I knew I had crossed a line, even if just briefly, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. I spent the rest of the day replaying the moment in my mind, wondering what it meant and what I was going to do about it. The next few days were filled with tension and uncertainty. I couldn't stop thinking about Mark, about the way he had made me feel alive, desired, seen. But I also couldn't ignore the guilt that gnawed at me every time I thought about Daniel, about the promises we had made to each other. Then, a week later, I received a text from Mark. "Hey Sarah, I know things got weird last time. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. No pressure, just wanted to make sure you're okay." I stared at the message, my heart racing. I knew I should ignore it, should try to move on and forget about what had happened. But the pull was still there, the temptation too strong to resist. "I'm okay," I typed back. Just trying to figure things out. How are you? His response came quickly. I'm all right. Just been thinking about you a lot. I miss talking to you. I hesitated, my mind racing with conflicting thoughts. I knew this was dangerous, knew that I was walking a fine line. But I couldn't help myself. I miss talking to you too. We continued texting, the conversation flowing easily as if nothing had changed. It felt good to talk to him, to feel that connection again, even if it was just through a screen. But as the days went on, I knew that we couldn't keep this up without consequences. Then one afternoon, Mark texted me. I'm going to be in your area tomorrow. Want to grab a coffee? I stared at the message, my heart pounding. I knew I should say no, should keep my distance, and focus on my marriage. But the temptation was too great, the pull too strong. Sure. Let's do it. We met at a small cafe, the kind of place where nobody would recognize us. When I walked in, Mark was already there, sitting at a corner table with a coffee in front of him. He looked up and smiled when he saw me, and I felt a flutter of nerves in my stomach. Hey, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. How's it going? Good, he replied, his eyes studying me. I'm glad you came. We made small talk for a while, catching up on the past week and avoiding the elephant in the room. But the tension between us was palpable, and it didn't take long for the conversation to shift. Sarah, Mark said suddenly, his voice serious. I can't stop thinking about what happened. About us. I looked down at my coffee, my heart racing. Mark, I don't know what to say. I'm married. We can't. I know, he interrupted, his eyes filled with regret. But I can't pretend that I don't feel something for you. I've tried to push it away, but I can't. I felt tears pricking at my eyes, a mix of guilt and longing swirling inside me. I feel it too, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. But this is so complicated. I don't want to hurt anyone. We don't have to do anything you're not ready for, Mark said softly, reaching across the table to take my hand. But I need you to know how I feel. I don't want to lose you, Sarah. I squeezed his hand, my mind racing. I knew this was dangerous, knew that I was risking everything. But the truth was, I didn't want to lose him either. I don't know what to do, I whispered, tears spilling over. I'm so confused. Mark stood up, pulling me into a gentle hug. We'll figure it out, he said softly. Together. And in that moment, I believed him. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know how we would navigate the complexities of our feelings. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back to happiness.